we are zapped into a state of consciousness where we can no longer unsee it. And we go, this thing that has been protecting me and saving my life for so long is literally now killing me.
Mhm.
Am I willing and brave enough to try something new?
Yeah.
And if so, what is that? And how do I double down on practicing those new behaviors so I can change the course of my life?
Hey, fans and listeners, welcome to the Female Athlete Nutrition Podcast. I'm coming at you today from my old childhood bedroom, which my dad has taken over with all of his running paraphernalia, shall I say, medals, honors, gadgets. So if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see a different, exciting background. Honestly, it's a little silly, but it might be better than my usual background, which is a blank wall. So I'm excited for today's episode with a guest, Dr. Samantha Harte. Dr. Samantha Harte is a distinguished doctor of physical therapy, author, speaker, and advocate for holistic wellness. As the founder of a premier fitness and wellness studio in Santa Monica, she has refined physical therapy by integrating mind, body, and emotional well being. With over 2 decades of experience in the fitness industry and a profound personal journey of resilience, she's dedicated to empowering individuals to achieving lasting transformation. Dr. Harte is the best-selling author of Breaking the Circuit: How to Rewire Your Mind for Hope, Resilience, and Joy in the Face of Trauma, where she shares her personal journey through trauma, loss, and addiction. In her book, she reinterprets the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, making them accessible to a broader audience beyond traditional recovery spaces. Her approach emphasizes universal principles of healing, offering guidance for anyone seeking hope, resilience, and empowerment. As the host of the Truth About Addiction podcast, Dr. Harte facilitates candid discussions on addiction recovery and the complexities of living a sober life. Featuring expert insights and real life stories, the podcast serves as a platform for education, healing, and advocacy. As a sober wife and mother of 2, Dr. Harte draws from her personal and professional experiences to inspire individuals on their journeys towards self discovery and well being. I was excited to have Dr. Harte on the podcast for a variety of reasons. I thought we could have an interesting conversation about her role in physical therapy and building and maintaining running a fitness studio, but also was really curious about this concept of addiction that she went through personally. And I thought this is something we could talk about on the podcast. This is a nutrition podcast. So I thought, well, how can we talk about alcohol and sobriety, but less so from a nutritional perspective of how does alcohol affect performance or how many calories are in alcohol, but truly how it can affect one's life and what living a sober life really means. But I had no idea where this conversation was truly going to go. You will find that Dr. Harte really does most of the talking because she is a storyteller. And boy, does she have stories to tell. This is why in her work, she's very often a keynote speaker in the work that she does, because she's got a lot that she's gone through personally and professionally, and she shares it in such an empowering way through her storytelling. So, what we end up talking about in this podcast is truly how perfectionism really ran her life for so many years. And it was somewhat just her personality trait and somewhat adaptive and coping from her childhood, and how perfectionism even led to alcoholism. And I think for my audience as athletes, whether you have this in you innately in your personality or even childhood trauma that might have turned you into a perfectionist, I think this can translate over into how Dr. Harte went through alcoholism. Maybe you've experienced that yourself, or even just how we get addicted to other things like exercise or the addiction of tracking your diet perfectly or trying to achieve a specific aesthetic ideal. And Dr. Harte shares her own experience with disordered eating during a time in her life, which I had no clue was going to come in the conversation. And so it's so amazing how truly the root issue of perfectionism created these issues in her life, but more importantly, how she overcame them. And that's what I want you to hit on here is how when you listen to the episode is how you can overcome these struggles no matter how big they are and really getting to the root issue, which going back to her work as a physical therapist and someone who helps people with fitness, she's all about getting to the root issue of healing. And there's so much overlap between your mental wellness and spiritual wellness, along with your physical health and wellness. So enjoy this episode. Quickly, I'd love to remind you to revisit episode 229, where I interviewed OBGYN Margot Harrison, founder of Wave by Nutritional Supplements to support women throughout their menstrual cycle. I've been finding huge personal success while taking this supplement. It's really the first of its kind that I think addresses reducing menstrual cycle symptoms and helping reproductive health. And this might be huge for athletes who are looking to reduce cramping and pain because you're trying to train through your menstrual cycle. Go to waveby.co and use the code Lindsey Cortes, LINDSEY CORTES, for 15% off your first order. We're getting great feedback already. Many people have started to use it. I'm using it and they're noticing an improvement in their menstrual cycle symptoms, and that helps you experience life as a female athlete even better. Waveby.co, Lindsey Cortes for that discount code, or check out episode 229 where we dive into it deeply. Dr. Samantha Harte, thank you so much for joining. I'm excited for our conversation.
Oh, me too. This is an audience that I deeply relate to. And I know there are parts of my story that when I share them honestly are going to help the listener. So I'm really grateful that I'm here.
I think so much of your work as I've kind of did my background, trying to go on your Instagram, listen to your podcast, so much of the work that you do is driven, out of kind of your own life experiences and things that you're going through. And then that becomes your passion to get into it. And then when you figure it out for yourself, you're like, I can help other people too, which is beautiful. And I can say the same for myself and in most of my life too. And you've got so many different layers of the work that you do. You're a physical therapist, you just help people with movement and fitness, you help people with overcome addiction, you help people find inner peace and healing and this mind body connection. So there's so many different layers. But I'd like to start this conversation with, where you did get this technical education and degree and going down the path into the physical world of fitness and physical therapy. And I just kind of wanted to ask you where that interest for you came from and what some of your, kind of what your physical therapy philosophy is after working in the industry for so many years.
Yeah. I mean, how far back do you want me to go? Right. Because what's fascinating about becoming a doctor of physical therapy, it is less about the start of my career and more about the journey to even get there in regards to your listeners and how this part of my story will impact them. So here's what I'm going to say. I grew up dancing and wanted to do it professionally. Then I realized I could sing and I'm like, what I want to do is get a record deal and be a star. I always loved the body. I always loved the way that it moved. I never thought that I would have a job where I taught other people
Mm,
how to move and how to prevent injury, how to heal. Never. And the first massive place where perfectionism showed up, and it would be several years before I uncovered that I might actually want a career treating the body,
mhm,
is when I went away to college to Boston University. And I was a straight A student, of course, right? So my grades were perfect. My body was perfect. I danced as well as I could. All these things like check, check, check. If
mhm,
I could just play the part on the outside, then my insides were good. And I go away to BU majoring in communications because school was so safe and the art and entertainment were so unstable. And I
mm,
wasn't being pushed by my mom, who was really emotionally speaking, my primary caregiver. to pursue entertainment. So I just kept following the path of academia because it was safe.
Mm-hmm.
I do so well my first year. I start to do really well the first half of my sophomore year. And then I get a professor who is only giving me a C on every writing assignment. And I cannot handle it. Absolutely cannot handle it. I end up plagiarizing. He gives me a 0 and staples to the back of the paper, see me after class, with all the pages of the person I had plagiarized from.
Oh.
And I go over to him and I have this obviously massive pit in my stomach. And he's like, I was wondering why this was so much better than your other work. So I looked it up and I'm going to report this to the academic committee and they will decide what to do with you.
Mm-hmm.
The irony of this, right, is that however many years later, I ended up writing a book and becoming a best-selling author. So, ha ha ha, professor. Turns out, like, people can, make a mistake and recover from that. But
Yes.
the level of shame was hard to put into words, and I didn't actually make full sense of it for many, many years
Mm-hmm.
because the thing that happened before my addiction went from I don't have an addiction. I occasionally drink and use and it's all fun, but then I do everything I'm supposed to do and I do it really, really well into the addiction just skyrocketing and
Mm-hmm.
eventually taking my knees. But that was the moment. So Boston University said, we're suspending you for 18 months.
Mm.
Like a death sentence, right? What is it?
Yeah.
What would it mean that I was going to come back to be you beginning as a junior when all my friends would be just about to graduate?
Right.
It was, and there was no way. I mean, I was never going back to BU. It was over. So I
Mm.
put this around and I say, I'm pursuing dance. That's it. This is my ticket out of this life that my mom wanted for me and into the life that I was destined for.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a vessel that was prepared to receive or handle any of the trials and tribulations or any of the blessings of
Mm-hmm.
entertainment. So, what do you do when you're 21 and you move to Manhattan to become a star? You bartend. So within
Mm-hmm.
3 years, I'm drinking all the time. Then cocaine gets introduced. And I'm also not comfortable not finishing my undergrad degree because this idea of you're so smart, get your degree, nobody can take
Yeah.
it from you. And the safety of school was so seductive. And I'm like, can I do both? Can I just try to do both? So I end up part-time going back to school at Fordham University, getting my undergrad degree in communications while I'm bartending, while I'm trying to audition. The rejection of the industry is just crushing my spirit. My addiction is rampantly taking off and getting worse. And school just continues to feel like the safest thing. So I end up settling in this place where one of my very early on roommates in New York City was getting her doctorate in physical therapy. And I was like, so sexy. I remember thinking, man, if all else fails, I'm going to do that. Because then I have doctor in front of my name. And that's a career where I could do so many things. I could
Mm.
really help people at the deepest level. I could own my own practice. I could work with dancers and athletes. I could go
Mm-hmm.
on, I could see myself inside of that professional container. And so the more scary the entertainment industry became because I couldn't handle any of it. And the more severe my addiction became, the more I relied on what kind of grades I could get that would set me up to potentially go to PT school if all
Mm-hmm.
else failed.
Mm-hmm.
And after many, many, many years, because it took me obviously with the year off from BU, a long time to get my undergrad degree. And once the
Yeah.
PT I planted, I had none of the courses that you need to get into
Right.
physical therapy because I had avoided science as an artist like the plague. I was like,
Right.
I hate science. I had to take 2 years of pre-med courses,
Mm.
which was miserable. And once I started on that train, let me just take one chemistry class and see how I do. Hated it, needed a tutor, got a terrible grade on my first exam. once I started, it was like that perfectionist again was like, can't stop now.
Can't
Might
stop.
as well. And so by the time I get my acceptance letter into physical therapy school, I wasn't really auditioning anymore, but I was teaching dance at
Mhm.
what's called the Alvin Ailey Extension Studio, which was this really prestigious place to be teaching dance. And I was like, okay, I haven't abandoned the artist in me completely.
Mhm.
And now I have this opportunity to get this really fancy degree. But on the evening of my acceptance into grad school, I overdosed on cocaine, which is a really important lens into the high functioning addict
Yeah.
and the level at which we can operate in two completely opposite worlds at once. Extremely dangerous.
Mhm.
It's to the outside world. Oh my God. I was in shape. I had a boyfriend. I was surviving, paying my rent in Manhattan in my 20s. I was fit. I was about to be a doctor, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
And in order to quell the unrelenting anxiety of having to be perfect all the time, and when I wasn't, the critical voice inside of me that just
Mhm.
beat me up incessantly, I drank and I used
Yeah.
to excess until it almost killed me. So that's like the journey into even the physical therapy field.
Yeah.
Forget about how long it took me after that to actually get and stay sober and start living a sober life and getting out into California because I was in New York and beginning my PT career, right? So before I
Yeah.
go on to that and what my philosophy is, I'm going to stop because you might have questions
'Cause
about
that was a lot.
out of what I said. I know it's a lot.
Yeah. But no, see, it's so funny because when I was like researching you as a guest, I'm like, you have so much to share about this addiction and mind body connection. And it was almost like PT was kind of like thrown in there. Like, oh yeah, you're also a physical therapist. I don't want to say it was thrown in there, but now that I hear the story, this makes so much sense of this high achiever that you are, and this, you found this plan and you were like, I have to do it. I have to see it through. And there was a connection there, being a dancer and everything. And, but
Yep,
also like trying to, please your parents, get the perfect grades. Even just that story about plagiarism is so, it is very honest, and I can relate. And I think so many people can, that we're more afraid to get a C. If we're so used to getting the A and being perfect, the thought of being less than perfect would make us do something that, or maybe a different version of ourselves can't even imagine. Like, well, now we'll plagiarize. I mean, this is why elite athletes might even end up taking performance enhancing substances. It's like the idea of not being on the top anymore is
exactly.
just so crushing that they'll
Yep,
go to the extreme just to stay on the top. And this is,
yep.
this is why I actually, I can't say this for every professional athlete because, we want them to be clean, but, something goes on in that process, their journey, their life, where they're processing these emotions and, they made a choice. Like you just made that choice to plagiarize. And afterwards you felt terrible. You had so much shame about it. But, it's because the thought of not being perfect was too
Mhm.
difficult. And so many people that are high achievers like yourself and so many athletes can resonate with this.
Yes. And I want to also say, and this will continue to come up as we talk more, because I can say this now,
Hmm.
16 years sober from where I sit and all the work I've done, but I had no idea for so long what was underneath perfectionism. And there's many things, but the thing I want to say is that being perfect at as many things as I could be perfect at felt safe to me.
Mm,
I had to learn the hard way how unbelievably unsafe it actually is. But not only was I hardwired as a type A, I came out that way,
hmm.
got environmentally reinforced by an extremely unstable childhood, by a mentally ill, prescription pill popping mother, an enabling father and an emotionally absent father, and a sister who was acting out with sex and drugs. And I was the young one, and I was moderating and mediating the whole family dynamic. And as
Mhm.
long as I could look a certain way, get a certain grade, make mom happy, everything was all right. So
Yeah.
perfection equaled safety.
Safety.
I think it's so important.
Mhm.
This idea of like, why couldn't you just get a C? Why couldn't you? It's so deep.
'Cause
The
then things would fall
temper,
apart.
the
Yeah.
temper of these behaviors almost always go back to some of our formative years and the things that we learned about what it means to be safe and secure and loved and worthy of
Mhm.
belonging in our home.
Mhm.
And so if we, at the deepest, most fundamental level, on a physiologic level in our nervous systems, associate perfection with safety, we will chase it, even
Mhm.
if it kills us, even if it blows our whole life up,
Mhm.
until we are zapped into a state of consciousness where we can no longer unsee it. And we go, this thing that has been protecting me and saving my life for so long is literally now killing me.
Mhm.
Am I willing and brave enough to try something new?
Yeah.
And if so, what is that? And how do I double down on practicing those new behaviors so I can change the course of my life? And that didn't happen to me until I was 5 years into sobriety.
Mm.
So I still chased down this idea that I could perfect the world around me and the people, places, and things in it for much, much longer until it absolutely stopped working.
Yeah. I'm writing notes. Sorry. So many things you're saying that are just good. I'm like, I need to touch on this, but
First of all,
I
it's so important, right? Because I
yep.
want to normalize the experience because it feels so, it's insidious, it's obsessive. It literally feels like you cannot stop doing it. And I
Mhm.
just, so important to touch on that this really comes from a deep need
Yeah.
that wasn't being met.
Mhm.
And we found a way as kids, we're very crafty, to meet the need, to adapt and get through the situation that we were in that was really hard. And what was once adaptive, just like drugs and alcohol, by the way,
Mhm.
right? It's a relief from pain and suffering. It's
Mhm.
adaptive at the time, becomes maladaptive
Mhm.
often many, many years later. And it can show up as a physical ailment, as a spiritual malady, as a 18-month suspension at a university. It
Mhm.
becomes maladaptive.
Mhm.
And we're confronted with, are we ready to change?
To
Are we
change.
ready? And that process is unique to the individual, right? That's why, like, when I talk about rock bottom, my overdose, you would think, right? You pull back and you're a normal person who doesn't suffer from perfectionism or addiction, addictive tendencies, you'd be like, well, surely
An
that's
overdose is
rock
rock
bottom.
bottom,
Like,
but
what
it
other
wasn't.
call do you need other than
Yeah.
almost dying? That was not it. And that scared the shit out of me. I mean, I
Mhm.
knew that if I kept using cocaine, I was probably going to die. But I didn't know I needed to do anything about my desire to control the world around me.
Right.
Why would I give that up? Look what I had accomplished as a result of that skill set. I
Mhm.
had evidence all around me that it was serving me.
Mhm.
Culturally, perfectionists get rewarded. They get patted on the back for all the amazing things they do. The problem with perfectionism is that it collapses in matters of the heart,
Mhm.
and we will all be confronted with those.
Mhm.
That is eventually what took me to my knees.
And I wanna this is so powerful, and I wanna talk about this moment, that finally was your wake-up call and things changed, but I wanna draw a few parallels to a few of my listeners that some of them might just be 100% resonating with you, and some of them might resonate with this story, but maybe instead of it being their outlet or to as they're dealing with this anxiety and this pressure and perfectionism or trauma from their past and trying to control, instead of it being alcohol for them, what I hear in my experience as a dietitian working with athletes is so many of them use exercise or their diet to
Mhm.
control. This is one other thing. It feels safe for me to control my diet. I've got chaos going on in my life or instability going on in my life. And if I just control my diet, if I just control my body and how it looks, if I just control my workout and if I just achieve, something greater, if I always get this workout in, always run, always lift heavier, always run faster, keep signing up for race after race, like this becomes their addiction. So some people might be resonating with the alcohol, drug addiction. Others, I think, in my listener category will resonate with, you know, trauma experiences, needing to control and this desire for perfectionism. And their drug is this perfectionist diet and an
Yep.
exercise addiction. And what you said though is, okay, so some people can have alcohol and at first it's adaptive. You have a long day, you have a glass of wine, it's adaptive, makes you feel better. And same thing, yeah, clean up your diet a little bit, get a workout in, you feel better. These are healthy things to get a workout in and clean up your diet. But there's a point where it can become maladaptive when it starts hurting you, when it starts taking things away from your life. So if I can speak to that for a moment, in regards to exercise and diet, it's when your health is actually declining. For you, it's okay, one drink maybe doesn't affect your physical health that much, but now you're overdosing, your life is on the line, you're binge drinking. This is affecting your physical health. Same thing with diet. You cut out carbs, maybe it doesn't affect you for a week, but you cut them out for 2 years. You have an eating disorder. Your health is declining. Your liver labs are through the roof. Your cortisol is shot. You don't have a menstrual cycle anymore. Your skin's breaking out. Like you can't sleep at night. You're waking up all night long. Your health is declining. You're no longer, this is not adaptive anymore. And it can be the same thing with over exercise and exercise addiction. It's taking away from your time with your family. You're getting injury after injury. You're spending hundreds of dollars on physical therapy and surgeries. Like this is now maladaptive. It's taking over your life instead of helping you anymore. So I just
Yep.
wanted to expand on that if that resonates with some of our listeners too. But I do also, I shared with you, and a reason I wanted to even touch on the alcohol piece, I shared with you off air that I've had clients over the years that have come to me struggling with diet and exercise going a little too far with their, perfectionist diet and their need to exercise high intensity all the time and get bigger, faster, stronger, or smaller, faster, stronger. And some of them have opened up to me that they actually used to have an alcohol problem and then they got sober, which is amazing. But then it turned into an exercise addiction. So it's like one addiction kind of transferred to another. And maybe, as you were saying, you were sober for 5 years before you finally let that perfectionism go. And that's kind of where I've intercepted some of these clients in their journey of, okay, they healed from alcoholism. That's great, but they didn't heal from the perfectionism or whatever else it was, a root cause that was driving this in the first place.
Mhm.
Right? Fans, I'm pausing the conversation again to check in on you. Are you concerned that you have REDS? That's relative energy deficiency in sport. It's a syndrome of not ideal health consequences and performance consequences that all stem from the idea that you're not fueling optimally or fueling enough for your sport needs. I've become an expert in this over the years because unfortunately, a lot of female athletes struggle with this. We have research that shows sometimes up to 90% of female athletes might be suffering from at least one of the side effects of REDS. Other research says that up to 45% of female athletes are struggling with disordered eating. These are big statistical numbers, and I don't like it. I'm here to help you become fierce, fit, and fueled. So first and foremost, head to lindseycortes.com/REDS to learn more about REDS, listen to past podcast episodes, and take our free REDS quiz to see if this might be a concern for you. From there, I've got 3 ways to help you. 1, download the REDS Recovery Guide and start taking action right away. 2, join our REDS Recovery membership. For a very affordable $15 a month, you will have access to me as a sports dietitian to educate and empower you to fuel better. We meet once a week for live calls, Q&A. You have access to the recordings if you can't join live, and a community group chat to support, encourage, and motivate you along the way to fuel fiercely. Last, spots are limited for one-on-one help, but I can help you personally through one-on-one coaching, be it my Fast Track program, the Female Athlete System of Transformation, or perhaps Fuel School, depending on your age. All of that is on my website, lindseycortes.com. But because one-on-one spots are limited, I really want to encourage you to join the Reds Recovery membership. We live in a world where it's very easy to just pop online, read an article, listen to a podcast, and I think we do a decent job at getting information out there, but we all need someone to talk to and really ask those personal questions, and also be open and honest in a community that's going to support you in your fueling needs and goals. And that's exactly what this membership is. So only $15 a month. We meet once a week, and you will be provided with so much education and empowerment and support. I know you won't regret joining. Head to lindseycortes.com/Reds, and there you will see the Reds Recovery membership that you can join, and join us this week. It's time for you to be fierce, fit, and fueled.
Oh yeah. And I want to jump ahead for a second because I, at around 10 years sober, I had just had my second baby and the pregnancy was really complicated. I was so grateful when she came early and was crying. They warned me maybe she wouldn't because she was little and the lungs are the last to develop. I was sick all the time, but I also had a high risk condition, and second baby gained more weight than I wanted to. So all the body image issues that I've carried around my whole life were totally flared up, even though I'd already had the first baby, gotten back in shape. And here we are again thinking, oh, this time, surely you'll trust that, you'll get yourself back in shape. Nope. I was as obsessive as I ever was, but knew I couldn't that much about it and was much more concerned about my baby being okay. 3 months postpartum, I lose my dad suddenly.
No.
Now, my relationship with my father was extremely complicated. I had mentioned earlier that he was the family enabler, and I was always split when I would see him, meaning my intellect, my sober mind understood that my dad, who all these years later, who was still legally married to my mother, but physically separated, was so unbelievably enmeshed with her emotionally, financially, obsessive about it, was still giving her prescription drugs and my sister that weren't prescribed to them. I understood he was a sick man who was doing the best he could with the very limited tools he had, and that his best sucks a lot of the time. But
Yeah.
emotionally, I felt so betrayed by him.
Mhm.
I felt like he was killing my sister, that he was participating in her addiction to the point where he was contributing to her potential death. And so I say that because every interaction I had with him almost always went sideways. So even if it started off loving and fun and there was a chip on my shoulder and I was
Yeah.
edgy, bitchy. And so when he died, I had no idea that the way our relationship was when he left the world was going to haunt me. And now I had already had my spiritual rock bottom in a marital crisis at 5 years sober, where I had to do this deep, immense healing work to truly, for the first time in my life, surrender to this idea that I do not know the outcome. But here we are in this new crisis that I'd never been in, and all the old behaviors came roaring back. Now, I didn't understand this because I was postpartum. So the through line for me always was watch me bounce back,
Yeah.
world. All you people who had some shit to say about how big I looked in my second pregnancy, just like the girl who went away to BU and was like, oh, you think I'm going to gain the freshman 15 and flunk out in my first semester? Watch me come back thinner with straight A's, which is what I did. That part of me was like,
That came
we're
back
gonna
out.
lose the baby weight. We're going to lose the baby weight and show them.
Yeah.
What started as sort of this very familiar version of myself became at around 9 months postpartum, when I did get back to pre-pregnancy weight, a different part of me. Because the part of me that showed up was saying, I wonder how skinny we could get.
Mm-hmm.
That is when I knew I was not okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't care, because the idea of turning toward my grief felt impossible. It literally felt like it was going to kill me. And I preferred to run from that pain by doubling down over controlling food and body for as long as I could,
Yes.
until I couldn't. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
so I know exactly, to the listener who's tuning in,
Mm-hmm.
is controlling everything they eat, every way that they move, measuring their food,
Mm-hmm.
counting calories, weighing themselves obsessively. That was me 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And never before or since was it ever that bad. But here we are. Life throws me
Yeah.
this loss that I'd never navigated before. And I run straight back towards these old behaviors with a new presentation.
Mm-hmm.
The scary part was that I was choosing it. I knew I couldn't relapse and die. If I relapsed, I would have died, and I didn't want to die. But I absolutely did not want to face my pain. So this seemed like the best option. So fast forward, I'm now very lean, right? Most of
Yeah.
the world is telling me how unbelievable I look.
Mm-hmm.
Or
That's the
couple,
tricky part, huh?
right. Couple people are like, are you okay?
Yeah. But
What do you
most
mean?
people give you praise. Yeah.
Right? Dangerous. So dangerous.
Dangerous.
My husband takes me on a date, and I'm dreading this date, because here's what it was. We're each going to spend an hour in a flotation tank, our own tank.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're going to go to sushi. Okay. Now, I've been spending months and months and months running from myself. So now I'm thinking, you're going to be trapped with yourself for an hour. It sounded like torture. And then you're going to go to a sushi restaurant, and you're going to come out of that restaurant probably 5 pounds heavier because of all the sodium. So,
Right.
so that's in the tank. And I'm obsessively trying to plot out, how much should I work out today? How much should I eat today? How much can I eat at dinner? How much should I not eat at dinner? How much water should I have? What am I going to do tomorrow? Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
It's
It was
exhausting.
fucking insanity. Okay. And then this is where the miracle happens. At 45 minutes, it goes quiet. Everything stops. And my intuitive voice, who I had come to know 5 years earlier in my marital crisis, which is where my breakthrough and my healing began, who I hadn't heard from in a while, because this obsessive perfectionist part of me was so much louder.
Mm-hmm.
She stood up and she said, why are you punishing me? And it made me want to cry, because
It makes me want to cry. Yeah.
I knew exactly what she meant.
Mm-hmm.
And here I am yet again, unable to turn away from that kind of truth. I was literally so ashamed of the daughter that I had been, over the things I couldn't change anymore about my relationship with my dad, that I was making myself disappear.
Yeah.
Not in as quick and severe of a way as using a bunch of cocaine, but still the same.
Mhm.
And so for the last 15 minutes in the tank, all my recovery came back. And by the way, it wasn't like, a white light experience where I just suddenly had a healthy relationship with food and body. It took a couple of years
Mm-hmm.
of abstinence from getting on scales, abstinence from standing in front of the mirror, picking myself apart,
Mm-hmm.
all of my fitness watch, not measuring the food. It took 2 years. So I'm now 3-4 years out from that part of my
Yeah.
life. But in that moment, my recovery showed up and said, you need to spend the last 15 minutes in a forgiveness meditation. Go. And so I inhaled and said, I love you, Sam. And I exhaled and said, I forgive you, Dad. And I said it again and again until it felt enough. And then I switched it. And I inhaled and said, I love you, Dad. And I exhaled and said, I forgive you, Sam.
Mm.
I came out of that tank hysterically crying. My husband was like, what just happened in there? And I told him. And, not that long after that, 3 years later, I lost my sister to a drug overdose. If it had not been for that experience of being sober and trying to run from my grief and how utterly it failed,
Yeah.
God knows what I would have tried when
Right.
my sister passed away. Because I was filled with terror when that happened. What am I going to do this time? Am I actually going to relapse and die because the pain is too much? Am I going to starve myself again? Am I going to have an extramarital affair and just blow up this big, beautiful life I've worked so hard to build and rebuild, by the way, when we talk about the story of my marriage? What lengths am I going to go to not feel these feelings? And what are we really talking about? What are we talking about with addiction, with eating disorder, with perfectionism? All of it has to do with wanting to know. We want to know. We want to see the outcome. We want someone to tell us how we're going to get through this thing that feels impossible. I just said earlier, perfectionism collapses in matters of the heart. There
Mm-hmm.
is a pathway that is A to Z through that kind of pain, through
Yeah.
resentment, betrayal, heartbreak, grief.
Grief.
There is no pathway. And life can guarantee that we're going to get hit with some of those things. So what is the skill? What we're talking about, the root of this stuff. The root is, how do I learn not just to be okay in the not knowing, but to be joyful in
Mm-hmm.
uncertainty? And if I can figure out that skill, I can handle anything.
So, Sam, how do people begin that? I mean, when somebody's in the depths of grief and yeah, let me even just share a story. One time I had a client that had an eating disorder, and it was, from what knowledge she shared with me, related to grief, the passing of a loved one and a complicated relationship that was there as well. Kind of similar in to your story, and how, okay, you're no longer using alcohol and drugs, but then it turned into the diet obsession to avoid the grief. So I had a client like that one time, and as her dietitian, I felt this because I knew there was a limit to how I could help her, because this grief was controlling the situation. And fortunately, she was able to, through me and other experiences she was having in her life, I don't take credit for this, but she was able to get into a different type of help and really lean into therapy that really has hopefully helped her more, because the problem wasn't nutrition per se, right? So anyways, I guess my question here is like, how, when that root problem, we're using these other things to mask the root problems. We're using alcohol, we're using diet, we're using exercise, we're using drugs to mask this root issue of, I need to face my grief. I need to face the trauma. I need to face the pain. How do we even begin that? And maybe a secondary question is, if somebody else, like a provider, is seeing that, how do you begin to address that? Where do you even start? It's just a
Sure.
lot, which is why people avoid it, because it's a lot.
It is a lot. Yeah. So I can say today, having written a book and with the time I do have in recovery, that I have an entire framework that I take
Mhm.
people through, and it's a step-by-step process. The reason I have the framework, though, is because when I actually hit spiritual rock bottom at 5 years sober. I was in this marital crisis. My husband's pulling away from me. I'm trying my damnedest to make him love and forgive me again, because we've been together 22 years, 22 years. So I'm sober 16. You guys can figure this out. We've been together 22, which means everything that happened in my active addiction happened with him and to him.
Mm.
Cheated more times than I can count, lied, everything that addicts do, I did to myself and to him. So the wreckage of that showed up on the front end of our marriage, because did we slow down? And no, I was about a year sober and stomping my feet. And are you going to propose to me? Or if not, like, why are you still with me? Just, I wasn't really spiritual or working a spiritual program. I was fighting the 12-step program tooth and nail. And we rushed, we should have gone to therapy. We didn't. And so all this wreckage is here, and he's pulling away, pulling away, pulling away. And this shit literally has me coming undone. This is the moment where, after sleeping on so many friends' couches and fighting with him day in and day out in fits of rage and kicking my leg through the drywall of this house we were renting, and just it being so unmanageable to live this way, where I couldn't change his mind and I couldn't make him love me again. And my intuition was trying to tell me, something isn't right here, Sam. But it was so overridden by the critical part of me that said, this is what you fucking get for what you did.
Mm-hmm.
I end up moving out and sleeping on friends' couches. I didn't know that was going to turn into months and months and months of couch surfing, and eventually signing a lease in this separation and just being at utter bottom, where I didn't want to die, but I could not go on living the way that I was living.
Yeah,
Was control the world around me.
Yeah.
When that happened, here's where the solution comes in. When you're asking me, where do we start?
Yeah.
This is where I had a new beginning, a new chance to start. And I was fortunate that a woman who was in recovery, who had experience in multiple 12-step programs, came into my life, and she said, what if we do the steps on your marriage? Now, 12 steps up until this point, I had worked them to the best of my ability, but I grew up in a house where if you believe in God, you're a fucking fool, and your intellect is everything, and the only person you can count on is yourself. And so again, you want to talk about safety. The 12 steps did not feel safe to me. They butted up against every childhood belief that kept me safe. So I worked them the best I could, but my higher power was still everything outside of me. So everything external that could validate my existence was my higher power. And I didn't know until the marriage was falling apart that my husband's love for me was my higher power. So here I am at rock bottom, and this woman makes this suggestion, and I'm thinking, well, this is something I might be able to get behind. What do you mean? Well, instead of focusing on powerlessness over drugs and alcohol, you're clear on that. What about powerlessness over your husband, over the past, or what you've done, over the fact that he hasn't forgiven you, that you guys didn't get over what's happening in the marriage right now? You don't fully know. You don't have evidence of anything, but you're not sure, over the future of the relationship and whether you're going to end up together. And when you try to exert power and control over all those things we just said that you can't, your life becomes unmanageable in the following ways. Can you see the unmanageability? That was very clear. I mean, I was freaking homeless. I was filled with rage. I had no sense of self-worth. I was constantly anxious. Check, check, check. Unmanageable. And if all of that is true, then what do you have power over? I hadn't even considered it. I don't know. Right? I had to start thinking about that. Oh, my own healing, the stories telling myself, the meaning that I'm making out of what's happening. And so we start trudging through the step work in this way. And we get to the 9th step, which is making an amends. And I'm kind of dreading this, because I'm like, I made an amends to him so many times. How much longer do I have to feel bad? I already felt so bad about what I did. And she said, no. Have you ever made an amends to yourself? And why was that so important? Well, let's see. My perfectionism is a part of me, but I was so blended with that part that she was me.
Mhm.
And all she ever said to me to keep me in line so I could do the things I needed to do to be safe was tell me, nah, not good enough, not skinny enough, not pretty enough. Try again, do better, be
Mhm.
smarter. So now this woman is suggesting that that's just a part of me and that I can become a woman who loves and forgives herself. She gave me a permission slip that
Mhm.
I didn't know I needed. What did that mean? That meant that if I wanted to have a different life, which I very much did, I had to become so conscious every time that perfectionist part of me showed up. And I had to separate myself from her and listen to the way she was speaking to me. And I had to not numb her and also not believe her. I had
Mhm.
to show up with compassion and curiosity about why she was there and then speak to her and say, hey, girl, it's you again. I know why you're here. You've been working so hard my whole life to protect me. And I think you think you're protecting me right now because when you tell me this stuff is my fault, it gives me the feeling that if I'm the one that did this, then I can fix it.
Mhm.
But that's not true anymore. And that idea is killing me. It is crushing my spirit. And since I want to be a woman who does believe she's worthy of love and forgiveness, I'm going to have to speak to myself differently in this.
Mhm.
And then I had to dream up what that would be. What would it sound like instead of, this is what you fucking get for what you did? And I was like, okay, you did those things, but that's not who you are.
Mhm.
And what you want and deserve is a big, beautiful life and a healthy, happy marriage. And we're going to heal and commit to our healing so that we can continue to believe that that's what we deserve.
Mhm.
And so I redirect my self-talk from critical to compassionate again and again and again. This is the practice. This is the science of change now. I literally interrupt decades long feedback loops
Mhm.
of having perfect. And I'm starting to rewire the way I speak to myself. What happens in this process is that that little whisper of my intuition that was trying to say, I think he's cheating on you. Something isn't right here, that I just didn't want to listen to and couldn't fully believe because the perfectionist part was so much louder.
Mhm.
This volume knob got turned down and the intuitive one got turned up.
Mhm.
And I knew it was a different part of me because she was calm, curious, and compassionate every
Sounds
single
different. That voice sounds
time.
different.
It's so different. And physiologically, she felt different. It
Mhm.
was completely, it was a relaxed parasympathetic nervous system state versus the ruminating fight or flight, gotta figure it out, gotta measure the
Mhm.
food part of me. It was
Mhm.
so I knew, and I knew it was her when she showed up. And I had nothing to lose by taking a chance and following the direction she was nudging me in.
Yeah.
So I started to wait for the sound of her voice. And in that apartment, she said something as silly as, you're going to have to furnish this place. You're going to be here for a little while. Go and look for some furniture that makes you feel really good. Look for colors that make you feel good. And I
Mhm.
start to see bright colored blue and I love it. And she's like, that's your color. Turns out that became the color of my business and my brand. And it is to this day. It's on my
Yeah.
nails. It's on
Yeah.
my book. It's splashed everywhere. And it
Mhm.
seems so small, but I was 30 years old and I didn't even know what my favorite color was. And the reason why it's important to say that is because it's really scary to start listening to a new part of ourselves when these protective parts have been in charge for so long. So
Mhm.
if you listen to a small request, like buying something tiny, a little trinket, a pillow
Yeah.
that's your favorite color, and have a positive experience of how it makes you feel, you'll be more likely to take the next suggestion that's bigger. Like when she said to me, "Hey, Sam, you're $100,000 in debt from going to graduate school and you're making $33 an hour working for other people. And all these patients are getting discharged at 60% better. I think you can make them 100% better. I think you might even be able to build a business off of this. Why don't you ask them
Mhm.
where they're going when they get discharged?" And so I did. And they said, "I don't know. I guess I'm a hire a trainer." And I was like, "Oh, no, 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 no.
You're gonna hire me.
With a trainer, train with your doctor." And that is how Strong Heart Fitness was born. And there's
Wow.
1,000 instances
Mhm.
after that where I have honored the call of my intuition.
Mhm.
So that is the longest way to answer this very short but difficult question of how do you make a start? My entire book is a modern and trauma informed reinvention of the 12 steps, which is the
Mhm.
framework that saved my life that I have used again and again and again with myself and with the people I coach
Mhm.
as pathway through their pain so they can learn to be joyful
Mhm.
in the not knowing.
Well, what a great place to start for anybody that is, feeling any of these things, recognizing again, whether it be, I'm saying alcohol, drugs, it could be, yeah, relationships with other people, inappropriate ones, extramarital ones, food, body, exercise, all of these things that we're doing and we're not healing the root issue, or we need to overcome this addiction that we're having. What you've taken is these 12 steps to become sober and overcome alcohol addiction, and you've applied it to other areas of your life. And you've worked through it with other people and other clients, and you've written a book about it. And so this could be for somebody listening, like, let's go get this book, Breaking the Circuit, and apply these steps. And it's so, as you're talking, Samantha, it's interesting because for anybody who's new to my podcast, I'm a sports dietitian. I help athletes, but then in that, a lot of athletes deal with disordered relationships with food, and I even had an experience with that as well, and eating disorders. But there's some dietitians that get into working with people with eating disorders, just go straight through, like they're an eating disorder dietitian. I was never an eating disorder dietitian, but what I ended up doing is in working in athletics and having my own experiences, going through my own therapy for some of my own trauma. I'm just going to share with you some of my own trauma that had nothing to do with eating. I realized also healed. When I healed those traumas, I healed my relationship with my body. I healed my relationship with food. And then I started applying, when I work with clients, I started applying some of
Mm.
these tactics of when I went through my own healing and therapy. And I started sharing that with my clients, even though I'm like, okay, my trauma was totally different than theirs. But the point is, let's apply these ideas, like you said, of like powerlessness, making amends, acceptance, self acceptance, forgiveness, and rewiring of the brain, turning up one voice while turning down another. These are all things that I started applying them. And it was interesting because I had clients who had, let's just say an eating disorder, and they had been, seen eating disorder dietitians. And this is no shade on them or that practice. Please don't take it that way. I'm just saying if something wasn't working for them in that traditional way of healing,
Yep.
and then, I was teaching them certain things, and it was finally clicking because I'm going to go back again that my clients, the issue wasn't the food, it was another issue. We needed healing. So we needed to, so I just think that this book, and this might be, we're getting to those root issues to find healing. And and find your power again, find your intuitive self. It's not just healing, it's finding your intuitive self again. It's one step beyond healing, really, stepping into your power.
Yep.
Mm. Well, we're going to highly recommend this book. We're going to share it in the show notes. And man, there's so many other things that I know I got to be mindful of your time. So I might just record in my intro. So I've been taking notes as you're talking because it's such a powerful story, so much wisdom to share, so many people you are helping, Samantha, in so many different levels too. Because if you go on your website, you've got so many different ways you can help people. You still have your fitness, coaching as well, because you're helping people in that. You're helping them with their addictions. You're helping them with their mind-body connection. There's so many ways. And at the end of the day, it's all connected of you're helping people live more fulfilled, meaningful lives.
Exactly.
And however that is expressed, right? Just so beautiful. So I'm going to share, I'll record myself as I do your intro, a few other tidbits that I want my listeners to remember throughout your conversation. And oh, girl, I'm just going to, when this episode comes out, I'm going to listen to it again because I'm inspired by you. So thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for all the work you do. And thank you for publishing this book.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really nice to speak to an audience that I deeply relate to.
Yeah.
And I often talk on addiction podcasts,
Mm-hmm.
but again, that's just surface level. So I'm always trying to get to the underbelly and the root of everything. That's what I was doing in my private practice is, guys are all, now your symptoms are calmed down, but you haven't even dealt with the root of the problem. So you're inevitably going to need physical therapy again, right? So even physical body, spiritual body, emotional body, I am deeply interested at getting to the of somebody's suffering and freeing them from the emotional prison that they're trapped in. So to come on here and really be able to speak to that from a slightly different lens than just traditional substance abuse is as an honor and a privilege to me as it is hopefully to your guests and your listeners.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for listening, and I really hope you enjoyed that episode. Please help spread the message of empowering female athletes to be fierce, fit, and fueled by giving this podcast a 5-star review and leaving a comment. You can also help more female athletes by sending this episode to a friend. Head to lindseycortes.com for more resources, information, more episodes, ways to work together, downloadable guides and ebooks. And if you're interested in becoming a guest on the show or have a guest suggestion, head to lindseycortes.com/podcast, and there's a form for you to fill out to get on the show. Hey, there's more resources on my YouTube channel, Female Athlete Nutrition, Instagram at female.athlete.nutrition, and private Facebook group, Female Athlete Nutrition. I think you get the point. I'm here to support female athletes by fueling better and becoming fierce, fit, and fueled. Most importantly, if you need help, reach out. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next show.